Hi, I'm Jase Smith, co-founder of Mind Your Business. The Mind Your Business programme was developed after years of research into founder wellbeing, and what we found was that a holistic approach is required. We can't look at the founder and the business as two separate entities. When this happens, we run the risk of both suffering. In this episode, we're going to look at self-awareness and how founders can develop a greater depth of self-awareness in order to have greater clarity and greater focus on them and their business.
Welcome to the Founders Matter podcast, the podcast where we talk openly about what it really means to build a business on your own terms. Today, Jase and I will explore how you can develop a greater sense of self-awareness to help you stay focused when you're running your business. We'll discuss why founders can develop a loss of purpose, autonomy and achievement through overwhelm and subsequently experience decision fog, making running their business even more challenging than it currently is already. You'll also discover practical tools to develop good levels of self-awareness to identify when you're not feeling quite yourself and what you can do about it. So, you've got an ex-military background and years of experience in organisational safety management and mental health training. Now, because of that, you've seen just about every potential operational situation that there ever could exist. From your military experience, I've experienced firsthand just how gifted you are at assessing what options are available, cutting them down to their basest level of what they mean, and then making an effective decision based on that. I'm going to look at that part of things at the end of today, but I want to focus first on the mental health part. In your experience as a mental health trainer, what are the main wellbeing challenges facing people in general today?
I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a doctor or a counsellor or a therapist. From the workplace perspective, there's lots of reports every year, Deloitte, Gallup, CIPD, they all produce reports on wellbeing in the workplace, and I think that's probably a good place to start. And the three things that crop up time and time again. First one is the demands and the stresses that are placed on people. People are feeling increasingly under pressure, increasingly stressed, and finding work increasingly harder, which is sort of era of technology. You'd think things would be getting easier, but people do still feel that pressure. The second one that crops up all the time is the culture and the organisation itself has an impact on people's well-being. They're just the way the business operates, the way the business runs, the way managers perform. Data released recently that showed one of the biggest causes of stress for workforce is stressed managers and their subsequent behaviours. So I think the structure of the business will have an impact as well. And I think the other one that crops up time and time again is the work-life mix. People might feel they're getting too much of one and not enough of another, or they don't get the freedom to decide when work's work and when they can go home and do stuff. That sort of mismatch and that imbalance between work and stuff outside of work, be that hobbies, families, sport, whatever it is people want to spend their time doing.
So if you're a founder or a business owner, is it any different?
There are a lot of differences. That relationship, that psychological relationship that a founder has with their business is very different to maybe a manager has with a business or a member of the workforce has. But that aside, I think those three things are still very relevant. We know that founders are under a huge amount of pressure, a lot through the demands that are placed on them. Maybe it's when people start a business, they don't necessarily realise how much there is to do. When you work in a traditional workplace, you have HR to do HR stuff, you have logistics department to do that kind of stuff. All of a sudden you're a founder and you're doing everything, and not everything's within your skill set. So I think the demands and the stress piece is really with the top three as well. When you build your business, you have this aspiration to build it how you want to build it. That's why you're doing it. You want to work for yourself, you want to build something. But in a lot of cases, people inadvertently rebuild the thing that they've left. I leave work, the traditional workplace, because I don't like the culture, I don't like the structure, I don't like the process, whatever it might be. I form a business, and when it gets to a point where the business has to become a traditional workplace for other people, I default and recreate the thing that I ran away from. Yeah, a lot of people struggle with that because they realise they've become the thing that they don't like. And I think that work-life mix, again, is difficult for founders. Always on 24/7 culture anyway, and as the business owner you're on call 24/7 unless you have some really good boundaries in place. You leave a traditional workplace to set up your own business, to spend more time with the family, and then realise you're working 6 days a week, 7 days a week, 18 hours a day, and your family have forgot who you are because you haven't seen them. You set your own business up to earn all of the money, and all the money's yours for all of the effort. You're paying all the bills as well. So again, it's not as lucrative, certainly in that first year or two. It's not unusual to meet founders that are operating at a loss or certainly just breaking even. So I think the three key things of demands and stress, the work environment, and that sort of getting that work-life mix right and having the right level of autonomy and fulfillment is difficult for a lot of people, regardless of where they work.
Boundaries is something I struggle with, but boundaries is something that I think you're very good with. I know you're highly intentional with where you spend your time, money and effort each day. What process, if you want to call it that, do you use to decide what activities make the cut?
So to quote Viktor Frankl, between stimuli and response there's space, and it's up to us to make best use of that space. There's a difference between what do I want to do and what do I need to do. I think that the need to do stuff has to be on the priority list. The want to do stuff, they might have to take a bit of a back seat if there's need to do activity. I often ask myself, is this going to add any value to me or to my business? If it's a decision, then is what I'm about to do going to change anything? Is the outcome going to be any different? And if the answer is no, it's not going to add value to me and my business. I have to challenge myself, why am I doing it? If I make a decision and it won't influence the outcome, I've got to ask myself, how much effort do I put into that? Time is very precious. I woke up on my 50th birthday and realised I'd probably had more years than I've got left. So I thought I need to start and use my time a little bit more wisely. I'd had a roller coaster wheel of a time up to 50, but you suddenly become conscious that time is a commodity that you don't have enough of. And as a founder, there just never seems to be enough hours in the day for all the stuff that we want to do. It's almost like creating a things not to do list, which frees me up the time to do the things that I want to do, and therefore I use my time more wisely. People will sometimes ask me, how do you find the time to do all the things that you do? But I don't think I find time. I think you can't find any more. You've got 24 hours. You can't find time down the back of the city. So I think it is important that you look at what time you've got and just use it wisely.
At Mind Your Business, I'm known as Chief of Lists, and I do like giving you lists, don't I? Maybe I should have a not to-do list for us. Or maybe you just create my to-do lists into some of them being not to-do lists.
Never. I would never admit to that anyway.
Yeah, don't admit to it. There's so much talk about how to prioritise, and none of it that I've ever heard really talks about how to prioritise according to what you value rather than what other people value. Where have you seen founders, including yourself here, make decisions that unintentionally increase their stress by reducing their sense of direction, control or worth in their business?
Two things really. First one is when we slavishly follow what everybody else tells us we have to do. At the end of the day, it's my business. It's your business. It's whoever's business it is. And you started that business for a reason, and therefore you should run that business in line with your values, your purpose, and why you started. I think the why is really important. But there's a lot of pressure from many, many different areas, be it mentors, colleagues, advisors, business support programs, to conform. And I actually heard somebody say the other day, you need to conform to a certain way of doing business. If we fall into that trap of trying to conform rather than running our business the way we want to run it, that can cause challenges. Given that the research and the evidence suggests that the majority of small business owners just want a small business. They just want to make enough money to pay their mortgage, go on holiday, cover their bills. They don't want to take over the world and be a global entity. And if that's what they want, that's fine. And you should support them to do that and respect them really if that's their wishes. Don't put them under pressure. There might be a lot of reasons why they don't want to grow too big, be it financial, family commitments, there could be a whole host of things. We often don't see that human element looked at when we are encouraging people to grow their business. What if it doesn't suit them? Why can't they stay as a small shop, turning over a small profit as long as they're happy? And I think happiness is a commodity that we often forget as well. But a couple of examples. I was chatting to a young lad recently who had a business. It was growing moderately. He was very happy, and he took on some investment because he was told that's what he should be doing. But then his investors were driving him quite hard, grow the business, expand over a number of sites. Within about 12 months, he'd burnt out completely. It was too much for him to manage from a skill set basis, and that message of grow kind of overwhelmed him to the point where he burnt out and the whole thing collapsed, which I thought was a real shame, because had he been allowed to grow slower, it probably would have been a very big, viable venture in the end. Too much pressure to accelerate quicker than maybe he was ready. From a personal perspective, I sort of got a couple of years in and thought, well, I should be having bigger contracts than what I've got, and I should be earning more money. So I got into a bad habit of writing tenders for bigger contracts, which used to take a huge amount of my time, which at the time I wasn't then doing what I valued. And we weren't winning the contracts, they were going to the same people over and over again. And it took me a long time to realise that actually I didn't need any bigger contract. I had enough work coming in. I was happy with the level of income that was coming in. I was happy with my work-life mix. But I was only doing it because other people were telling me that that's what I should be doing. And it took a long time to realise that actually I run the risk of ending up with a business that's not running at the scale and pace that I was happy with.
What made you realise that then?
I was unhappy. My sense of fulfilment was really sort of diminished. Run your business how you want to run it. Take the advice, but it is only advice. You can then do with that what you wish.
What question to ask you to help give advice to other founders to get to that realisation and to realise what is important and how they can go about using their core values to make clear decisions daily, monthly, yearly, and in moments of crisis. Do you have any tips for that?
I don't think this is easy. This is not something you can sort of wake up tomorrow and suddenly become very self-aware and become very, very in tune with your values. I think it's important to deliberately stop and think about your values. What we often see is when we look at a business's values tend to reflect the business owner's values. So it is useful to understand what your values are. I think it's important to realise that your values are maybe different at times to the things that you like or the things that you are good at. When we ask people about their values, we sometimes get a list of things that they enjoy or a list of strengths that they have. That's the key thing for me, is really to take the time to think about your values, understand what they are, understand how they align with your business values. It would be unusual, but if you did have a business founder whose values were different to the business, again, that could cause some kind of tension and disconnect. When it comes to your network and the people that you work with and the other companies that you deal with, again, if their values aren't similar to your own, that can cause some kind of disconnect, which only can make you feel worse because you end up doing things that you don't really feel comfortable with. And again, that will diminish your level of self-worth. So I think your values are important at the start of your business journey. It's one of the first things you should sit and work out. The other important one is why you're doing it.
What about you then? What are yours?
Honesty and integrity. I'm a big fan of the Scandinavian model of having a very small network, but it's a very trusted network. I like to do professionalism, doing the best we can all of the time. I like to work with people who do things properly and are very honest. And even if the honesty bit is admitting that you've cocked up and saying that you've cocked up.
You have rebuilt your own life and identity countless times in the army and after the army as well. How did you intentionally or unintentionally use self-awareness and decision-making based on values to transition between the different roles you had?
I think in the military, sometimes it was easy because there is a perception of what that persona should be. So there's kind of an expectation when you take it on. It's almost like a role. You've been given a screenplay or a part to play for a couple of years. So I think there's a lot of expectation of that. And I think the hard bit sometimes is to be yourself against that expectation. The one thing I remember when I resigned from the military, the first feeling I had was a real sense of relief, almost like a weight lifted off my shoulders. After 35 years of working for the same organisation, which I was, I think, fiercely loyal and loved, when I resigned, it was this sense of, it was almost like taking off a heavy rucksack that I didn't realise I'd been carrying. And then, you move into the civilian world and set my business up. And I suppose in the early days, I just saw it as another assignment. It took a long time to understand I could be myself, because again, you read all the books, you look at all the stuff on LinkedIn about after 6 months you should be doing this, after 1 year you should be doing that, after you've done your 6 steps to 6 figures in 6 weeks, and on week 7 I was nowhere near that. You wonder what's going wrong. So it took me a lot of time. I think what helped me was in the early stages I wasn't necessarily financially driven or financially motivated. A lot of what I was doing was about impact. So again, I didn't really have any targets to reach in terms of monetary targets. I was very fortunate that I didn't have to take any on investment to start my business. So I wasn't trying to pay back creditors or reach certain milestones. So I think that helped, that I set my business up how I wanted to set it up and was able to run it in the way I wanted. I then sort of fell foul and drifted off into all the hype, and then managed to sort of pull myself back out of it, and again, back to running 2 businesses now.
Is there anything else that you think a founder would benefit from understanding when it comes to their self-worth as a human and as a business owner?
You don't estimate how hard it is to run a business. We can be tempted by the bright lights and the LinkedIn posts that it's easy and we can all make lots of money very quickly. And I'm sure if it was that easy, we'd all be doing it. Unless of course, I'm making a right mess of it. Be wary of the over-optimism. Your friends and your family are too nice to tell you that your idea's barking mad and it won't work. So I think it's about being honest with yourself, and speak to other founders who will be honest with you. Most people will only post their good days on LinkedIn. There's probably an equal amount of bad days that nobody sees. It's just trying to get a balanced approach. It's not always going to be easy. Know yourself, know what you're good at, know what you're not so good at, and have the humility to acknowledge that you might have to get help in certain areas. If you're not very good at something, don't just keep going on and on and on and making things worse. Again, understand your values and your likes and your strengths, because they might all be very different things. But I think the further you drift away from your values and the further you drift away from your original purpose, the worse you feel, the worse your self-worth is impacted. I think in terms of autonomy, it's your business, you've set it up. Take the advice, take the guidance, attend the courses, but run your business in a manner that suits you. If it was to spend more time with your family, how are you going to achieve that? The one thing I loved when I left the army, after 35 years of getting a sort of a year planner with some little bits of white, that was my life to squeeze in. It was very nice to open my diary, put in all my life, and then let work fill the little white bits. That's one.
What a shift.
Massive shift. And that's probably one of the best things I've found since running my own business, is when I open that new diary, I put in the bits that I want in first, and then everybody else gets to fight over the little bits of white that's left. And I think for founders as well, have a real think about what success looks like. I say for me, a lot of it's about impact. I know for other people it is about monetary value, and it doesn't matter. It's a personal choice, and there's no right and no wrong. But I think you need to just keep in your mind why you started your business and what it is success looks like. If you've set yourself a target and you are consistently failing to hit it, well, you set it. If you've set yourself a target of earn 100k a year, and the last 3 years you've only hit 80 and you're beating yourself up over it, maybe you need to review your target. It's back to that purpose, autonomy and fulfillment. If you can understand what that means to you and you can get that right, then I think you're halfway there. But it does take a lot of self-awareness and a lot of thought to do that. It's stuff we don't necessarily scrutinise too much in ourselves.
Pablo has created on one page the whole of everything that you talked about in one cycle, which we've got a PDF of for people. But to summarise what we've talked about today, every action we take every day directly impacts what we can't do in our personal life and our business life as founders. It feeds into an ever-present guilt, shame, anxiety and isolation cycle, and you literally never win. Something in your personal or business life has to suffer for another to blossom. So the key for effective performance and decision making is to make sure that you spend your time, money and effort on what you value most in your personal work-life mix. A summary of those theories that we've been discussing in this episode is available in the show notes including an activity to identify your values and another to highlight where you might have gone against them. And don't forget to sign up to get our check-in emails, where you'll receive weekly questions and information that follows and expands on the topics covered in the podcast. Thank you for listening.